qué lástima que yo no pueda estar con ustedes en la conferencia Reasonable Faith. You asked me to do a short video about what pastors and leaders will face apologetically in the world today. What I'm going to share with you is not what you probably expect to hear, because I do not believe knowing all the evidence for faith, knowing all the evidence why Christianity is true and all, is the starting point. That's the end point. You've asked me to do a video. It's a short video, but it's actually the starting point for any apologists. If you do not understand what I share in this video, which is a result of 50-some years of ministry, then you probably will not be effective apologetically in sharing the truth and the evidence for the Christian faith. Listen carefully. And hey, next time I'm in Colombia, South America, anywhere, and you see me, please come up and introduce yourself and say, I was one of those at the Reasonable Faith conference. How I wish it could just be you and me sitting here in my living room, sitting on my couch, and just discussing these issues that we face in ministry today. Especially I want to address those who are pastors. I don't like to call people leaders. I like to call them influencers. And probably you are a significant influencer in the body of Christ and in the world around the church. So maybe some of my observations of 50-some years out there dealing with youth culture, with young people, with their problems, their frustrations, their hurts, their solutions and all, will help you to better understand our culture today everywhere in the world. Now you have to understand, just about everything I say today is relevant in every culture of the world, every country, to different degrees and different connotations of it. But because we live in a world that is so small today with the cell phone and the internet, it's taken a large world and shrunk it into a small world. As a result, whatever affects the world here is affecting the world here and here and here in almost every country. So I believe you are intelligent enough to take what I share and to adjust it to your culture. But understand, I've been in 130-some countries of the world, given probably a little over 30,000 talks in 170 countries. And so I have a little bit of a background to speak on this. When we look at culture today and reaching young people especially, and even older people, we need to understand several issues, challenges. I don't call them problems, I call them challenges or issues. You could call them an epidemic, because an epidemic deals with things, whether good or bad, that becomes broadly spread in the world, becomes an epidemic. And so when you use the term epidemic, it doesn't have to mean negative. It could be positive. Say, really manifestation of love could become an epidemic. It could spread through the whole world. And so I want to share with you some of the issues that I see, and you need to understand my main task is probably research. I've written 150-some books, and you can't do that without a lot of research. And so here are several things that rise to the top in research, especially for me in the last 3, 4, 5 years. One is this: you've got to be ready to deal with depression. I would encourage you to study depression. Why? You're going to get questions about it. And you will understand that a lot of things that people come to you with are surface, that there's deeper depression in their lives. And if as a counselor and a pastor, you don't see that deeper issue like depression, then you're going to counsel them wrong and possibly hurt a lot of people. And so in depression, teens are saying that 96% of their friends suffer from anxiety and depression. Whew. These are teens saying about their friends that 96% suffer from depression, 90% from bullying. 88% from drug addiction. Now, these are teenagers talking about their friends, and they say that 88% of their friends, or 90%, are addicted to drugs or being affected by drugs. And the number one generation that is being affected by this is the Generation Y, ages 8 to 25 years old. They score the highest on mental illness tests. That's incredible. Young people with everything to live for, with access to so much and all, and yet experiencing mental illness. 80% screened. They took a study. Now, I might be wrong on this, but I think it was 2,000 people, young people. 80% screened positive for moderate to severe anxiety. 80% on a test. You'd probably call it a scientific test. 90% screened for depression. 80% screened for anxiety. You put those three together, it's almost 100% of young people are anxious and depressed to various levels. At the Federal Emergency Hotline, the government of the United States set this up, and there's other countries I'm sure that have this. The Federal Emergency Hotline is for people in emotional distress. Their life is kind of falling apart, and how can you help me, whatever. And so they call a number, which they have professionally trained people to deal with them. Now think of this. I think it's 2 years ago, in 1 year, there was 1,000% increase of calls to the emergency distressed hotline. 1,000%. And approximately 22% of adolescents 13 to 18 suffer from some kind of diagnostical mental illness. Folks, we need to be informed on depression because it's often not something you can see in the individual. It's within their endemic system and not seen on the outside. And I would encourage you, and I'll tell you at the end of my talk where you can go to find help yourself to help others. See, we need to understand it so we can help others. We need to understand it because I have found when I study some of these problems that people are facing, all of a sudden I see some biblical scriptures saying something different than what I've always thought what it said. And so that's why I like to get help to understand these issues. Depression. Another is, and this is huge, in a world where we have so many means of technology for communicating, the internet, the iPhone, the computer, the laptop, everything, all over the world. And yet one of the biggest epidemics or challenges is loneliness. Loneliness. Now what I'm going to share with you here was an eye-opener for me. I never thought this was such a big issue, especially how deadly loneliness is. The British Prime Minister recently appointed a Minister of Loneliness for the UK. Now think of that. Along with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of this and that, the Minister of Education, they now have appointed a Minister of Loneliness. They appointed a Minister of Loneliness, and now, the moment they did it, then Japan did it. Now other countries are starting to do it. In their studies, they found that a third of the responders of the 55,000 British people who were surveyed felt lonely personally most of the time. I can't imagine that. Being alone is different than being lonely. You could be in a big crowd or sitting around a table with 15 of your friends, and you can still be lonely. So there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is not that negative in your life. For me, often I just want to be alone, and it's positive. But loneliness is a different issue. In 2018 survey of 50,000 British citizens, and this was conducted by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, found that a third of the respondents of the British people that they feel lonely. "33% of British United Kingdom people feel lonely and distressed. Almost half, 47% of Americans say they're lonely some of the time each day. That affects your emotions negatively and your outlook in life. The New York Times Daily News reports that more than 20% of millennials ages 21 to 39, 20% of millennials ages 21 to 39 surveyed in a government poll found that 20% of them claim that they don't have one single friend. That's 20% of this generation, 21 to 39, say, I don't have one friend. Folks, that's devastating. We were made to be relational. We were made to live our lives out in Christ through the church, through the body of Christ, through people. And if you remove that from your life, I don't care who you are, you cannot be all that God created you to be, especially emotionally. A major university here in the United States, I don't want to mention its name, but it's a major, influential, and a very good university here in Southern California. In the last several years, they've been confronted with incredible problems with loneliness and depression among the students. It got so bad that they appointed a minister of loneliness to deal with the young people on their campus that are suffering from loneliness and depression, anxiety. In fact, now this was surprising. This university, one of the most prestigious in America, they have a trained wellness dog that roams the campus to minister to students in the area of loneliness and depression. I thought, that's incredible. Phew, I didn't even know that. So I'm speaking in, I think it's Ohio, to a large group of students, several thousand, and I shared this about this university that I so respect, and I still do, of course, in Southern California, that they have a wellness dog that roams the campus. And pretty soon, hands started going up all over this crowd. And they said, well, we have 3 on our campus. We have 2 on our campus. We have 1 on our campus. And I thought, whoa. So education now needs to use dogs to minister to the students emotionally. That is dangerous. A 2016 survey by the American College of Health in Canada surveyed 44,000 post-secondary students. 44,000. 2/3 of them are measured out to be 67% of them reported feeling very lonely. Are we failing or what? I don't know. You know, loneliness is the first thing that God said is wrong, is not good. It's not good for a man or a woman to be alone. Now listen to this. You just heard these stats. And I wouldn't share them if I didn't think they were legit. But also very surprising to me. That people who feel lonely have a 26% greater chance of dying earlier. Whoa. In fact, more people die from loneliness than depression and anxiety combined every year. That's how deadly loneliness is. People died from loneliness at roughly 7,000 per day last May and June. Died because they felt lonely. Within 6 months of a screening test they did with thousands of people, just last year, they saw a 406% increase of depression, 450% higher than the number was 6 months before. A Reuters report, Reuters News, in 2019 on suicide and suicide thinking of young people. Severe depression and rates of self-injury starts around 12 years old. And now get this. The suicide and self-injury, severe depression were found mostly among younger generation. Not older, like you would think. The older you get, and you get lonely and your friends die, No, it's the younger generation. Younger than 25 years old is the demographic that faces the greatest problem of depression and loneliness. 90% of 21 to 28 years old in a survey of about 5,000, 21 to 28 years old, 90% screened positive for moderate to severe depression. You know what that said to me? I need to be more sensitive to my surrounding of people. I need to be a lot more sensitive to people's feelings. I need to ask God to allow me to open my ears and open my eyes and see what's within a person, not their surrounding activity and life that they portray into the culture. I need to be more sensitive to where people are. And I'm trying to learn more by asking the right questions, but the biggest thing is by listening. We've got to deal with loneliness, with depression, anxiety. Now, if somebody said to me, what's the number one issue that's destroying people, relationships, marriages in the entire world? Is there any one thing that's probably true in every culture in the world, and especially cultures like Korea and many Asian cultures? Is pornography. It's pornography. I have no question about that. The number one challenge, the number one epidemic, meaning spreading widely and influencing, is pornography. Statistics show 91% of men, 60% of women have visited porn sites in the last 30 days. That was part of a major study done. And the question was probably simple. They do it scientifically. Is, have you visited a porn site in the last month? 91% of men, 60% of women. The Huffington Post says that 30% of the material that is streamed on the internet is pornographic. Whew. Now, if that is true, and I have no reason to question that, That is huge. There's nothing as big as that on the internet. Now just think of this. One click away, and this is what is so dangerous, just one click away from 26 million pornographic websites. I never dreamed there could be that many on the internet. 26 million. But here's the thing. It's just one click away. But get this. Of the pages of pornographic material, right now, the latest stat of 5 years ago was 2.3 billion pornographic web pages. I would put it, from studying before and how long it took to get to that, I would say right now there's about 2.8 billion pornographic web pages, one click away. And you know what the pornographic industry says? 30% of those looking at our material, going to our website, everything, are children. 30%. That'd make multi-millions of children. This shows the depth of pornography. According to Christian teens and young adults, now get this, not recycling is more immoral than pornography. If you do not recycle, you are more immoral than if you were watching pornography. Young women are far more likely to actively seek out porn than those 25 years old and older. It's young women that are seeking out porn so much more than older women. You want to visualize a graphic of how big porn is. If you take every day porn that is distributed, print it all, it would fill, by 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, it would fill the entire Empire State Building in New York, one of the largest buildings in the world. A corporate executive confided in me that he was really having problems with his daughter. She was about 13, 14. And he said, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? I said, why don't you invite me over to your house, introduce me to your daughter, have dinner and all, and see what comes out of it. So we did that. Went there, had dinner, talked, pleasant, everything. I went into the living room in front of the fireplace. And in just a few minutes, his daughter came in and said, Mr. McDowell, could you help me? I go, what's your problem? School? Your dad? Your mom? What? And she said, I've been addicted to pornography since I was 7 years old. And my parents have never, ever talked to me about it. I need help. Can you help me? And I thought, from probably what I've seen in years in ministry, years in interacting with young people and all, is that this is probably not unusual. And this was a leading Christian man in the community and a corporate executive. And his daughter, he was looking at her behavior. I got to the bottom of what is causing that behavior, and it was porn addiction. And this is one of the problems. If you don't, as a parent, as a pastor, get help to understand, not that you're having a problem with porn, but to understand the problem of porn, you will not be able to help people in your congregation or young people in your school or in your youth group. If you don't get help, not for you personally, but for you to understand the consequences of porn addiction. This is why dealing with porn is so difficult. 49% of young women and 67% of young men in a major study said porn is acceptable. Did you get that? 49% of women, 67% of young men said porn is okay, it's acceptable. So when you start talking about porn, you first got to start out, what is moral, what is immoral? What does the Bible say is moral? What does the Bible say is immoral? And then look at porn. Because people are up there, people like myself and others, and we say porn is wrong, don't watch it. I usually give a lot of good reasons, common sense and everything. And they're saying, well, that's ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with porn. And by the time you get to the issue of explaining porn, young people have tuned you out because they think you're irrelevant. It's no problem, porn isn't. Whew. Over half of all young people think that way. Pastor, what about you? Influencer, what about you? Every other year, Campus Crusade for Christ, now known as CRU, which I've been a member of for 50-some years, every 2 years they have a national staff conference of around, I don't know, I think it's 7,000, 8,000 people. And we had our conference in Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado. I was standing outside when one of the meetings broke up, and one of our crew leaders came up to me and he kind of chewed me out. He had just heard me speak on porn. He says, Josh, what are you doing? And I looked at him, I said, do you watch porn? Now this is one of the leaders in CRU. I said, do you watch porn? He said, I'm offended by that question. He said, no, I don't. And then he chewed me out. I felt about this big. And I said, oh, Lord. I didn't apologize to him. I said, Lord, was I wrong here? About 3 weeks later, I was speaking at a conference where this crew leader was present. After my first talk, he walked up to me and he said, how did you know? I'm thinking, what in the world is he talking about? How do I know what? He said, how did you know when at staff conference you asked me that question and I was having an affair and I'm addicted to porn? I went, oh my God. No, this is one of the top leaders. I thought, oh my gosh, did I open a window to a big storm? I said, I didn't know, but now I do. He said for 3 weeks he was miserable because he had lied to me, and for some reason he kept thinking, he knows something. No, I just know that most Christian leaders are influenced by porn. I would say over half of them. And so I was just asking that question out of that. And here I exposed a sexual affair that started out of pornography in his life. And thank God, he was sincere enough and humble enough and wanting to walk with Christ enough that he was willing to get help. And I got him in touch with the American Association of Christian Counselors, AACC, the American Association of Christian Counselors. I believe porn is streaming through all Christian leaders who have fallen sexually, I'd say 100% started with porn. I want to give you a phone number. Write it down. It's for the AACC, the American Association of Christian Counselors. 800, then 526, 8673. Let me repeat that. 800, 526, 8673. And then write down their website, aacc.net. Wow, that's as easy to remember as mine, josh.org. But it's aacc.net. When you need to help somebody find a counselor, I always call with them or have them call AACC and ask if they have a counselor in their area. Because I believe it's as trustworthy as any counseling organization in the world, AACC. Call them. They want to help you. They will put you in touch with your zip code area and a professionally trained counselor who they know will be effective. So do that. Call AACC. Go to aacc.net. Folks, it's been a privilege to share with you from my heart, my mind, and my research. You might not agree on some of the things I've said here, the extensiveness of the stats. I don't blame you. I didn't agree with them. It was shocking to me, the size. But then as I've researched it out, and I've talked to many of our pastors and leaders, I go, whoa, we got a problem. Houston, we got a problem. So please take this to heart and contact AACC. God bless.